too, if you're playing it from your computer. Assalamu alaikum and welcome once again to a new episode, a live episode of the New World Education podcast. We're so glad to have you. Welcome, 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 family and friends. And just a moment. Okay, here we go. Had a couple of technical difficulties, but we're back on track here. So anyway, welcome to our seventh episode of the New World Education podcast. Today we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful discussion. We welcome, get your friends, get your family, get those who are interested in education and a new world, especially with the society that we're living in today. I mean, when you're talking about education and you're talking about what are we going to do? We have people that are talking about mandatory vaccinations for our children. The educational system is absolutely failing us. We're looking in on Zoom classes for our children, and people are saying, teachers are saying all kinds of derogatory things about, even like I saw a couple of weeks ago, a teacher was saying to her students, I think they were like in second grade, about the Black Lives Matter movement, and they were saying that they should not have, should not have given any credence to this whole Black Lives Matter. And so a mother walks by and she's listening at the teacher talk about that. And so she literally, goes completely off and takes her child out of the class. I don't know if you all heard about what happened in France. Now, of course, this is not something that that was on Zoom but yes, propaganda piece of satire. And you know that in the Islamic world, that we don't make any effigies or any images of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So what winds up happening is that we don't know who it is, but one of the students in the class was talking about that and told the teacher you should not play with the image of the Prophet. So they find the teacher in France decapitated, literally. So, you know, what's going on in the world today in terms of education, it is absolutely, the system is destroyed. And there's no respect for, especially us as Black people, and then us as Muslims, then that's like a double whammy. So you have an educational system where they don't respect Black people. And if you watch the president the other day, and they were talking about, I saw another thing, it talks about Black Lives Matter. And he said that that's a very racially divisive term, saying Black Lives Matter. So, you know, if we don't do something for ourselves, nobody will. And so, especially for our children, just imagine us sending our children into these killing fields and expecting, as we heard Malcolm say of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, if a person does not teach you right or treat you right, surely they won't teach you right. So we have to get up and we have to do something for ourselves, so we will suffer the consequences. Today, we have on our set with us a wonderful, wonderful, and brilliant sister, Sister Jasmine X, coming from Jacksonville, Florida. And she's going to join us in our discussion today. She is a mother of 5 beautiful children. She just recently had one after this Savior's Day. So she's has a toddler or infant, actually not even a toddler yet. She's an author. She is a creator. She's an educator. She homeschools her children. In addition to that, she has a degree in early childhood education. And also, if she hasn't completed her master's, I know she was pursuing her master's. Completed it? Okay, praise be to Allah. In addition to that, she has been an online teacher. She's taught children to speak English all the way in the faraway country of China. And, you know, just really a dynamic sister. And she, additional to that, she took a class with us, the orientation class. And so we would like to bring on Sister Jasmine X. Tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about the products that you've created and share with the audience about the class that you took with us as well. Sister Jasmine?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Sister Jasmine X, and I am from Jacksonville, Florida study group in the 7th region. And I recently received my degree in early childhood development. And with that, I was able to take the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center course. And literally, when I finished my master's, I took on a whole different approach. From the beginning, I thought that I was learning something that benefited our children. But as I was taking my master class, I used a different outlook. I looked at it from what does the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, what are they saying within this? You know, who is it that they're saying to stay ahead, and who is it that they're saying who will be behind? And so when I took that, I just made it my purpose to make sure that I get our children at this young age so that they can keep their creativity. They can, move ahead and not necessarily fall behind, which this educational system is designed for. And
Yes,
so,
ma'am. Mhm.
yes, ma'am. And so I do have our English lesson number C1 as taught to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so, this book is just near and dear. This was my first creation within the Nation of Islam. And also, I actually have an early childhood development center coming that will be virtual. So, our whole take with that is to work with parents to get them more involved and more engaged so that, by the time they reach kindergarten, they're ready and they're open and they have an understanding of what's expected at that time.
Praise be to Allah. So tell us about some of your other creations, because I know that you have clothing, you have bedding.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I literally, the minister said, it's basically for us to have a purpose where the teacher is to teach what they have truly learned. And for me, that was the teachings are so vast, and we have 7 units. So my idea was to start reaching towards mastery in every principle. And so, of course, yes, ma'am, I do sew baby bedding and baby clothing. And so I really wanted to focus on the entire baby experience, which is, their clothing, their bedding, the bedtime story. And now we're going even further into the educational standpoint of that.
That's beautiful. So tell us the name of your company.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am. I am actually the owner of Baby Guides, and we also have coming, which is Baby Guides Early Childhood Development Center.
Okay, so is you said it's going to be an online experience
Yes,
with
ma'am.
the. So tell us, what are your thoughts or what are your plans? How do you plan on delivering this online to children that are in early education? What are some of the plans that you all have?
Okay, yes, ma'am. Well, literally, I've created a learning management system. And basically, what I plan to do, because of course I do homeschool 2 other children. So basically, my courses will be pre-recorded. So it's basically, I show the parents how exactly the child can, utilize these different things. And so, in my opinion, I think it'll even take away the distraction of other children, because that child can literally get as much as they can take at that time. The mother can pause it, and then the child can come right back to it and still receive a good education.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have experiences with my granddaughter, um, Sister Nyambi out of Chicago, had a series that we absolutely love. As a matter of fact, I can't even say my granddaughter, because literally we started with Sister Gabrielle. She had some audios and videos that literally to this day we still can sing the song, celebrate Savior's Day, hot bean soup. Oh yes, those.
Let me tell you, I really got my alphabets and my
Yes.
numbers down. Okay,
Yes.
In Arabic, the
in
Arabic
Arabic.
alphabet. Yes.
Yes.
I mean, and so you just, our children are watching these, videos. They're watching Little Einsteins. They're watching Peppa Pig. They're watching for the so why don't we have something of our own that we are teaching from the standpoint of the teachers, of the teachings. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that we take the teachings and we give it to our babies in a form that they can digest, but we still give them the teachings. It excites them just like it excited us, and should still excite us. Well, what I want to do today, before we get into dealing with the methods of teaching the Supreme Wisdom lessons, this weekend, Student Minister Ava delivered a message, the law of God, that towards the end, she brought out something that just absolutely blew my mind. Because when we think about the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, sometimes, most of it just goes straight over our heads because we don't have the context by which to frame it. And so when she brought out this point, I'm sure that I've read this before, but it did not make really the type of sense that it makes today or at this moment until coronavirus comes on the scene. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to go to a clip. We pulled down the lecture and just honed in on the clip that she deals with. And it comes from this monumental book of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, The Fall of America. And he deals with, in chapter 21, the destruction of the American education. And so what we're going to do right now is that we're going to go to the clip and hear from Student Minister Ava Muhammad as she talks about um, the destruction of the American educational system. So let's see here. Let's pull up the video. And we are going to go into it in just a moment as we share our screen. Okay. Did you all get a chance to listen to that?
I did.
Okay. Well, hold on just a second, because I think I've started, but I want to start yet. So as we're starting, what did you all think about it?
Well, I can't say that I think anything of it because I didn't hear it.
You didn't hear it? Okay, well, let's go ahead.
That's a smart
I think I
answer.
got it. I'm sorry.
I said that's a smart answer. If you didn't hear it, don't speak on it.
That's right. Okay, let me share my sound and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you all can hear it. I guess first.
What has been the role
Yeah.
of the American educational system in the continuing subjugation of Black people. The denial of three essential human rights, freedom, justice, and equality, are critical to keeping the Black man in the position of servitude which he has occupied in this country since we were brought here in chains in 1555. That third principle, equality, comes from the adjective equal, which means to be the same in value. It also means having the ability or the resources to meet a challenge. Are you equal to the task? See, do you have the ability? Do you have the resources? This is what a human being must have, equality. The same value, whether I'm in the Oval Office or I'm laying in the gutter, I'm a human being. And there are essentials of life. Now, equally, fairly, and in the same way, to the same degree. But not only is equality denied, but inequality is deliberately forced upon Black men and women in America. And the engine of inequality is the American educational system. Why is the U.S. government and the imposter Jews who think for her, why are they so fixated on denying you and I a real education? I'll tell you. From the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. No one can enslave another who has equal education, parenthesis, knowledge. That's why we can't have it, because we can't be enslaved if we have an equal education. So Allah has forced us out of this slave-making educational system. He weakened this educational system with a plague nearly 50 years ago. I will read to you from the fall of America. Now you're looking at a pestilence from heaven. The minister said, you got to go to heaven to find a solution. Meaning you have to go to the mind of the Creator. And you can't get in his mind if you're not even communicating with him on his terms. But Allah has been setting America up for this day. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad called God's takedown of the American educational system a plague. I will read to you from page 21, chapter 21 of the Fall of America. The plague of Allah God against the educational system of America is something that the philosophers and scientists should look into, as the destruction of America's education is the destruction of their wisdom to educate the people. There are many who look on the destruction without taking a second thought of the destruction of America's education. Education is a guide for the people to keep and maintain a civilized life. It is education that civilizes us. Now to see the citizens of America rebelling against the American educational system is something that the wise of the wise should take thought of, and they didn't. The wisdom of the educational system of the original black man of the earth has never been known to this world, because the black man was put to sleep in order to let this world, the white man, try itself at ruling. Now the rule of this world has been found to be dissatisfying, and the dissatisfaction is 100%. Allah has come to take over and guide another people into setting up a better educational system for the people of whom he himself is the head. But first, he must remove all the rubbish of the white man's world's educational system. He discards America's educational system as rubbish to be burned up. The crumbling of the educational system under a plague from Allah is the reason these scientists today are running around in circles, not having a clue as to what to do about coronavirus. That's the reason. They don't know what they're doing. Wickedness is one thing, but what we rarely think about is the incompetence, the 6-ounce brain of the Caucasian. Cinderella's carriage has turned back into a pumpkin. You're no longer being upheld by the knowledge and wisdom of the God or what he has allowed you access to. Now you're going back to who you really are.
Okay, well, there you have it. How about that? I mean, Student Minister Ava put it right where it needs to be, right down to the modern times. We are in a time where this education system has fallen, is literally destroyed. So the question becomes, once again, what is our role? What do we do? What is our responsibility? And how do we go about it? Is that a new educational paradigm has to come about, because this world's education, and I really encourage everyone to go back and review this this chapter in The Fall of America. Go back and review it, chapter 21, and read what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has to say as it relates to how not only is it destroyed, but how people are rebelling against it. So what is it to be able to recapture the minds of the children? And that's where we come into this seminal book, which is personally my favorite of the books, and it's Our Savior Has Arrived. And this is by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And in the chapter, is chapter 23, it says, "See, He, Allah, makes all things new." And he tells us the routing by which this new education will come in to into play. What are the methods? What do we do? How do we go about actually developing this new educational system? Now, there are a couple of things that we're going to talk about as we go into this discussion today, because we want to talk about how did the master teacher, Master Farrakhan Muhammad, who is the head master of the University of Islam, how did he go about teaching his prime student? And then let's talk about the educational method that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad he employed when he went about teaching his students and his prime student, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And then we'll talk about how the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is teaching us at current. On page 123, this is what it says in Our Savior Has Arrived. And it talks about how this is going to be brought about. How is this new educational paradigm going to be brought about? And it starts the wisdom, ideal, and the way of thinking of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, to whom praises are due forever, is superior to any way of believing today. There is no one to hinder his image or thought, for that which has not yet been conceived in our brains. He goes after the root of all things, like our Black Father did in the beginning when he built the universe out of nothing. He is the one sitting out in space without nothing, universe out of nothing. Excuse me. He built the universe out of nothing. He is as one sitting out in space with no material of space to make something altogether new. He goes after the root in making his new world of people. As he said, first, now this is the first thing, he makes a new mind for us and a new way of thinking. He teaches us a different education, he says, one that we have never had before. He gives us an education on the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the gods, not of the prophets, but the gods of the prophets of the past. He builds our minds according to the way gods think, not the way of the thinking of the servants or prophets. The prophets of the past were inspired and their inspiration was true. So as student minister Ava pointed out in the Fall of America, this education of the Aboriginal Black man is one that we have never known before. So what is it that he is bringing? How does he go about creating for us a new mind, a new way of thinking? And let's translate this into the classroom. Who would like to go ahead and start off with this discussion?
You say how he bring about a new mind, and what's the question
Yes.
again?
So how does he do this? How can somebody go about bringing about a new mind? Now remember, he says he's like the God who created the universe. So he's this is altogether new, has not been seen in this last 6,000 years. How do you bring about a new mind for people? How do you, because this is a new education, he said, not an education based on the prophets, but an education based on the gods of
Guys.
the prophets. So how do we go about doing this? So let's think about this as we're discussing this, because we believe that Allah appeared in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, July 1930. And we believe that this one taught the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad what he knows, what we are sharing with you today.
So let's see. Well, I guess the first thing would be mimicking what the person does, or copying and repetition of what they do. Because as I stated in previous podcasts, once you're introduced to something, you didn't learn it. So I'll say in reshaping this, making this new mind and pattern after the gods is memorizing. Okay, that I would say start there with whatever lessons that the one that's teaching you.
Okay. Well,
Mhm.
educationally, that is the first level of teaching and learning is rote memorization. That's like the lowest
Mhm.
level in
Mhm.
terms of teaching. Many of us who studied education know about what's the it's not Madeline Hunter, but it is
Bloom's taxonomy.
Bloom's. And now they've actually augmented is Bloom and someone else in additional to that. But that's the first level of learning is rote memorization. That's why we teach our children nursery rhymes and
Mhm.
teach them to, recite their alphabets. Not that they know them, but they begin to start singing them and come up with songs and things like that because that's the first level
Mhm.
of learning. So yes, copy.
But I feel that with something new, um, especially dealing with the condition that we're in,
Mhm.
you know, that's probably how we would have to start with a certain amount of just memorization first and repetition,
Yes.
because it's for a lot of us it's just kind of hard to let go of what we one learn or think that we've learned,
Hmm.
and two, our insecurities about learning.
Yes.
So if you can get somebody just to keep, you know, saying whatever that you're trying to get them to learn over and over and over again, or write it,
Hmm. Hmm.
it becomes a part of them. And
Hmm.
so then you can probably at that point next uncover some of the meanings behind what you're teaching.
Well, I would like to say this in computer, and anybody can jump in. Sister Jasmine can jump in. So you don't have to stay on mute. You just jump in whenever you want to. But in computer
Double
language,
dutch.
that's when you're writing or uh,
Mm-hmm.
writing over a program. So, you're downloading a program to overwrite a
Mm-hmm.
former program. So um, when you're looking at memorization, is literally that rote memorization is writing onto your hard drive a new program,
Mm-hmm.
a new way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You may not, as you say, you have not learned it yet, but it's changing, if you will, the algorithm of how you handle information. So now when the information comes in, it processes in a different manner. So before we got this truth, there may have been things that perhaps that we did that we didn't see anything wrong with it. But once you
Mm-hmm.
got the program written over on your hard drive, now you start looking at the same thing in a different light. You all can
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and jump in.
Um, well, another method I would say, because I feel like I've read like 3 books just listening to between Minister Ava and you all's commentary, and I'm like, oh man, it's just so many points that are coming. But I was looking in the message of the Blackman, which I have here, but I know that the message of the Blackman, it starts off with asking the question, who is God?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most important question one could ask, as so teaches the Most
Mm-hmm.
High Elijah Muhammad. And so I was thinking, when you're dealing with the methodology, you want to start with the beginning in mind. So when you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing your students along, you want to first day, first time, first introduction, let them know where you are trying to take them.
Okay, you
Because
meant start with the end in mind. You said the
yeah,
beginning.
oh,
Okay.
start with the end in mind. Sorry, start with
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
end in mind when you begin, and so that way it orients the mind at the goal. So it's so
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
as you're going along this process, it makes it easier for the student to hone in on whatever point that you're trying to get across while they're getting all this information, and it helps the student organize this information accordingly. And so even if you notice, when we have textbooks or even any other book, that's why there's a table of contents. And the book is structured in a way, is because it's letting the reader know, or in this case, letting the student know everything that I'm saying is pertinent to this subtopic. So that's what I'll say is that, when you're going through this process, if they know what they are to be up front, it helps them focus on what they need to be paying attention to and things that are ancillary, and it helps them better able to focus.
And I want to go to Sister Jasmine on this one before you,
Yes,
because I know you're there, but hold on, because you showed us a book that
Listen,
you
oh
were
my God.
working on. Now, let me just toss this to you.
Okay,
You showed us a book
right.
called English Lesson C1,
Yes, ma'am.
and the children we're supposed to read that to them. But what is the first line of that lesson?
My name, what? My name.
My name
W.F.
is W.F. Muhammad.
F. Muhammad.
So that's in the first person. So they're actually putting themselves. Master Farrakhan Muhammad came to make us into himself.
Himself.
Go ahead, Sister Jasmine.
So, Sister Gabrielle just got my gears going. So the first thing is, it's called scaffolding, and that's basically where we're building on a foundation. And what better foundation than the teachings right here? And then the second thing that she mentioned, which through intentional teaching and stuff like that, or intentional planning, what you do is how you get the end in mind is what is the standard. And so Sister Deborah, she has already created this. And when I was reading her standards of what was going on, I said, oh my God, all I have to do is put the work in, because the standard of what's expected is there. And so any teacher that knows how to create lessons, only thing they have to do is literally read the standards. The standards have already been given to us. The best thing about the teachings is that we want to create a superior product. And the only way that we create inferior is if we put down God's curriculum and we pick up the enemy's curriculum and we think that this is it. But if we study just a little bit more and we see how the educational system has fallen already, because we've all been a witness to it. We've all read how it's not designed for us. So I think at this point, it's just getting that stample on and saying, I'm ready to move ahead with God's curriculum. I want to look at the standards and I want to create those lessons and scaffold, of course, and just build on and just keep building. And the best thing about it is, even though I am an educator, I am a student first. And so it's so much easier to teach children what we've really learned. And so it's just really, it's just so much. It's just beautiful.
Praise be to Allah. Well, you most definitely are moving in the right direction as it relates to understanding that what we've been given is an educational system, and to extract from it, extract from it, because it's a framework. And with the framework, you have something, as you said, with scaffolding you can build on. So what you do is that you bring your educational understanding to those lessons. And then once you bring that vision to those lessons, then it's apparent what we have been given. When we talk about the University of Islam, yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. So what you're actually talking about now is how to actually flesh out a curriculum from the Supreme Wisdom lessons?
Well, actually, no, we're not doing that, but we're talking about the method. But that just was part of a conversation that kind of came up because Sister Jasmine was able to see that, she was able to see into what you were saying.
Okay.
So we talk about the methods. We want to talk about the method of education. And the question that you said, that the most important question one can ask is, who is God? And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about is like a child that doesn't know their father, and that they want to know where they came from. And so who is God? And then the first question that we're asked in the lesson that the minister says should be the base of the curriculum is, who is the original man? That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being the case, then you're setting the student's mind to understand their potentiality of where they should be. So the question is really, we say, who is God? But let's ask the question, what is God? And how can you demonstrate what that is to a child? So when you're saying that you have to set that as an expectation for a child, when you're talking about, just let's take the youngest ones, the babies, how do you set that expectation for, what is God, and how is a child to reach for that? We're taught that Mr. Yakub knew what he was born to do by the age of 6. How do you set those expectations for little children?
But I think personally, honestly, children already have it. It's just it's just going throughout this construct of society what we have today, which kills that. Because I think they already have it. And so
And
it's
they,
just
they are,
being in this
yeah.
world, it's just the adverse effect.
Yeah, and I agree with Sister Demoiselle because I know we were watching a video with Sister Tracy Muhammad from Phoenix. She was doing an interview with Brother Willie from New Orleans, and I don't want to like misquote the sister or anything, but I'm paraphrasing it was a long interview. But basically, she was explaining how through I don't know if it was a conversation that she had with the minister or he was having a speech and she took away from it. He was telling her or sisters, like, with your children, let them figure out, what it is that they want to do and just encourage it. And so going back to Yakub, if we look at his narrative, it was never told that somebody told him what he was going to do, and my question is, if he had a conversation with his uncle, what was his parents? But see, that's me getting a little bit too curious for what we're talking about right now. But the thing is that he was experimenting. He had natural leanings, natural proclivities that he was born with, and whoever was his caretaker allowed him to experiment. And then from a childhood experiment being encouraged, he once he got to a certain age, he figured out this is what I want to do. But for him to, as we learn, to go to the highest level of colleges at that time, at the age of, I believe, 18, somebody must have been supporting him. You see what I'm saying? Somebody had resources. He had access to resources to be able to do all of these things. So there's a kind of an undercurrent that if you just continue to ask why, and go through that thought process, we might gain and glean some understanding from that. But I definitely agree. We all are born, like the minister said, with gifts, and it's the ultimate satisfaction of of your life is to figure out what is your purpose and express that gift and give it back to Allah. So yeah, we have to encourage the creativity and get out of the mindset of that. When children come to school, we are teaching them something that they that they don't know, and not that we're revealing things to them or helping them go through the process of understanding themselves.
Well, there's something very important that you said or that you didn't say. Oh, pardon me, that you didn't say. And when Mr. Yakub was a child, he was playing with 2 pieces of steel and having certain conditions set up for children to be able to. Now, let me back up. That childhood is preparation for life. Many of us think that childhood is meant so that we can play, things that don't have, they're pointless. Childhood is preparation for adulthood. That's what it is. And so when I was coming up, back in the olden days, we had centers. We had centers that you would go to and you would play. It may have been a cooking center where we had, little stoves and refrigerators and play food. had different centers where we would go to, but it was, you know, where we dressed up like people in the neighborhood. Could have been a post office person, works a post, we used to call them mailmen back in the day, but a postal worker. It could have been all these different types of careers or activities that we played in. And those things gave us something to look forward to when adulthood came. So as children, you know, we had dogs that we played with that were preparation for caretaking of children. And so all of those types of play were to get you looking forward. And so our play has to be not pointless play, it has to be play that gets us, our children, to look forward to what's coming in the future. And through that play, they can begin to start uncovering the things that are going to be required of them when they become adults. But also within that play, they can discover some of the things that they have a proclivity towards. Sister Janesville?
Oh, what was I going to say? I lost
About
it.
Yaku Plain? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, were you talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, one thing that I can say is it's more like intentional planning and intentional teaching. And so, of course, you know, the child can be playing, but if you set it up, then they're also learning that skill, even though it's fun, but they're really learning something. And I can use my child, for example. I just asked him, I was like, what would you like to do that could help build a nation? You know, and you start thinking in that aspect and you start asking them those type of questions, which is, what is it that you would like to do to help build something? And, you know, he told me that he wanted to do architecture. And so, I mean, I looked it up. I got the program that he needs. Now he's playing with it, but little does he know that I'm fostering that creativity. I'm not going to wait until he goes into whatever, you know, that he ventures to. I want to give him those skill sets now. That way he can be creative. That way he can be in a nurturing environment and learn a skill and a trade.
And there's one thing I want to, especially with this new generation of children coming up, even with you all, you are going to probably live long enough that you can have multiple careers. So we can't just think about in terms of what is the one thing that you would like to do. Like Imhotep, he was known for having several careers. He was a doctor, he was an architect. You know, so there were many things. Said he went to school for over 40 years. Just going to school, just imagine. You get out of school when you're 40 years old.
I can.
I can imagine.
I can too, but the point of it is that
I definitely watched it.
Yeah, you've watched it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that with that being the case, is that we have to change our paradigm of what we think school is. We think, okay, I can't wait till I graduate from high school. I'm tired of school. But that means the school has to have some other kind of meaning to us. We have to reimagine education in a world where we're going to live to be 150 years old. What does that mean? If you're living to 150, how does education look? Do you think that you would know enough at 18?
No.
You barely know it. You kind of just maybe the ice of the what they say, the tip of the iceberg, maybe around 50.
Right.
So
maybe.
you know, and that's why I say maybe around 50.
Yes. So education has to be reimagined.
Right.
It does. But what I will say is that the educational paradigm that we're under now is purposely built to do exactly what it's doing.
Right.
And that's a critical point to understand before we, because sometimes we start talking too radical, people get spooked and I'm like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. This is, like the Quran said, this is what I found my forefathers doing. So, you're doing something else. Not that it doesn't make sense. It's just different. Is that, sometimes we have to even understand what our current system is built to do. And so when we're talking about the fall of the American system, educational system, you know, it was built shaky. It was never built to produce, you know, world leaders, and you know, in these, you know, giants of whatever field. They purposely knew that, and they gave, you know, the poor people one education, and the people who actually rule the world, they have a different education. And so when we're looking at a new educational paradigm, you know, there's more than one educational paradigm that is actually here right now. So in this case, a new educational paradigm might just be something that is new to us, you know, or different from what we're used to doing. But there's definitely the fact that this educational system right here is in understanding its decline is just a simple mathematical prediction. And so that's why, you know, when you understand mathematics and you understand history, you know, things that might go on in the world take on less of a coincidental and, you know, hard, you know, you like a lot of people I see that's going on in the world right now is that a lot of people are looking around and they're panicked, you know, and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's only 2 weeks of the election, and all praises due to Allah. As a member of the Nation of Islam and a student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I'm like, I don't have any wrinkles in my forehead. I'm not sweating because, you know, I don't even subscribe to this world. So the world that is going down, you don't even have to worry about being a part of, because you're already onto something that's going to live forever. So it's like, it's just like reading the daily newspaper. So, okay, yeah, you know, this is, you know, yeah, they said this is going to happen. Okay, now I'm looking forward. So even before we get there, I think that it's just simply we have to acknowledge that what is here is just one way of doing things, but it's not the only way.
I heard the minister say it like this, that the new paradigm is that he said that we will flip the pyramid, because the pyramid now is where you have the elite at the top and the masses are on the bottom that support the top. He said that the pyramid will be flipped, where you would have the few on the bottom who actually, as Sister Gabrielle said a couple of weeks ago, where you have servant leaders that will support the masses. And so this paradigm has been one that has been built on the concept of slave labor and keeping the masses ignorant, and that's what supports the top. So the new educational paradigm will be one where the masses will be given the education that we say that the elite are given today. And so that's called, you know, flipping the pyramid. So we have to, now let's go back in our last hour of our podcast. Let's decompose now this methodology of making gods. Now, I don't know if we answered the question, how do we put that image in front of the child other than taking English lesson number C1, having the child to recite it. We said that Master Farrakhan Muhammad is a live person. Then you have the child recite the lesson in first person. I am W.F. Muhammad. My name is W.F. Muhammad. Yes. So if you have the child recite that, and you're saying that child is God, that's a beautiful way of connecting, if you think about that. That child to God, because you're giving them the image, you're saying that this is God. And there's a little activity that I like to do with the younger children, but it also works, it works at any level, to be honest with you, is that you give them a mirror, or you have them to make a mirror, the children, out of cardboard. And then you have them to glue the picture, the image of Master Farrakhan Muhammad on the mirror, and have them look at it and recite English lesson number C1. So they're saying, when they look at it, my name is W.F. Muhammad. That is a way to connect them to God, connect them to their potential. So that's a routing of getting them to see their potentiality. And then we need to think about how did Master Fard Muhammad, what was his routing? Sister Gabrielle and I talked about it earlier during the week. You have different types of instruction. You have direct instruction, you have guided instruction, you have where you facilitate, and all of those, you facilitate the learning. All of those are dependent on the level of the student, where the student is in their educational journey. Sister Demoiselle talked about earlier about rote memorization. That's a type or a level of learning at the most base level. So when you have little children, you have to do something called this direct instructions. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was taught night or day and night by Master Fard Muhammad. He was his direct teacher. He gave the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad direct instruction. So there was nothing that impeded his message to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that's how you teach little children. Elementary children have to have direct instruction. When they get a little older, maybe around 5th grade, what we start talking about them having maybe multiple teachers who are giving them direct instruction. And then when they get older at high school, by the time you get to high school level, for middle school, you have guided instruction. And then when you get to high school and college, you're more facilitating their learning. So we're looking at how did Master Fard Muhammad go about teaching the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad? We know it was direct instruction because that was the level that he was on when Master Fard Muhammad made himself known to him. Yes, ma'am.
I was listening to an interview with the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was saying how Master Fard Muhammad used to teach him. And he said that he would oftentimes say something, but it wouldn't be direct. That way you would have to think about it and figure it out yourself. And so he says, that's a part of how he would at least teach him.
So how do you think that Master Fard Muhammad knew the answer that he was looking for in the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad? Did he ask him a question he didn't know the answer to?
No.
I'll say that.
No.
That's a type of learning that this is my own personal perspective, because I don't know what this new educational paradigm is going to look like, because eye has not seen nor has ear heard. What we do know is that what Allah left with us is a transitional educational paradigm. That's why I said we're in the kindergarten of the teachings. So there's a type of instruction they call Socratic method, where the teacher already knows the answer. And so the teacher, what they will do is ask probing questions. You would try to prompt the student to come to the conclusion that you already know. But you wouldn't tell them directly, because the best type of learning is experiential, when you can experience it yourself. So Master Fard Muhammad, when he was teaching him in that manner, they called that the Socratic method, because I say call. Now, Socrates, of course, was taught by the ancient Egyptians. But the thing about the Socratic method is that you had one teacher and just a few students. So basically they had a very intimate relationship. And just imagine having an education where it's very intimate, where your child doesn't have to be in a room with 25 other students or 30 other children.
Right. But anybody can learn like that.
Exactly.
You cannot not learn.
Right. Because I
well,
found
who do you think can provide that education?
Everybody. We can. We can.
Yeah.
But that's why again, like when Sister Gabrielle said brought this in, where the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the women teach, because see, that's your students right there, your children. And you don't have to have 30. Some people may have about 10, but hey, it's still.
But they come usually one at a time.
Right. So I mean, it's still relatively, small.
And that's
10,
the better method, honestly. It's like like sometimes we try to bend our minds in the pretzel, trying to come up with these very advanced systems of doing things when Allah gave you the best. He gave you the best in right in your nature, and it's like, you've been convinced to overlook that part. And I don't want to teach my own children things like that, but okay, I don't want to overspeak, but I'm jokingly saying Master Deborah Muhammad, because she's giving us a real life example of this Socratic method, right now. Is where she asked us a question, and then, brought us down to the answer that she already knew and picked up right there. So well done.
Thank you. When you teach only from the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and my teacher, when you teach a man, you teach an individual. When you teach a woman, you teach a nation. So just imagine that this new educational paradigm starts right there in the home. We don't wait until they go off. When Yaqub was 6, he started school, but he was already in school. Whoever was his caregiver up until that point was providing him all of the fundamentals that he needed in order to make a deliberate decision to go on a certain track. The elite do that. The elite send their children on tracks.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. Going into that point of about this educational system that we're under right now. When Gabrielle was talking about that foundation, the thing is, you have to have an educational system founded in truth. Because she talks about that history and that math. That's why it's having the effect. It ran its course. And now we're at the end of that course, which is why it's coming, because now truth has come. And it's I can't even say they really had a foundation, but the foundation that they had, it wasn't a sturdy one to begin with.
Well, let me ask this. Outside of Brother Ben X and Brother Keon, on CNBC, MSN, Fox News, or any other of the multi-media outlets, did you see one mention of the most profound event that happened in American history yesterday?
I haven't seen anything.
Called the Million Man March.
I haven't seen anything on major news. No.
How do you write something like that out of history?
Like this.
Easy. When you control.
Did you get an eraser?
Easy.
No. I was saying easy. My silence. Silence.
Easy.
And that really is what they attempted to do with the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, after he departed, they attempted to I'm just going to say they attempted to write him out of history. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But they attempted to write him out of history. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan thwarted their plans to write him out of history, because history it's a weapon, honestly. It really is a weapon in the way you use it, and that's why history is so highly guarded, guarded by even the people of this world. With us, with history, because ours is so traumatic, we try to throw it away. But you look at the Jewish people, and they will, anytime you talk to them, they want to tell you about the Holocaust. Did you know about the Holocaust? Did you know about it? And because it is context to why they are, the way they are today and everything. And even their ancient history, they want to use that as a reasoning to why they deserve the things that they deserve today. So,
Mhm.
so I definitely I understand how history works, because history doesn't even have to be true to be effective, and we can see
That's
that
right.
today. And so, like I said, you have me going. I want to stay on topic because through some studies, I believe that again, when we're talking, I think we talked about it last week or what last podcast, when we talked about the thing is that Master Fard Muhammad brought us a history that went all the way back to the beginning of creation, whereas the devil only has 6,000 years. So it's, when you're dealing with the cyclical nature of history, that's not even a full turn around the clock. That's just only a small portion. And so if you know more, or you have more knowledge, you have more what? Power.
Power.
Because knowledge is power. And so
Mhm.
history is a knowledge, and
Mhm.
it's not just any knowledge, it's really the knowledge of everything. It's the knowledge of the reasonings why we are here today, and it's the knowledge of the way forward past this point. And so yes, history is a weapon. Definitely.
Without going too deep into the lessons, I think that I would be okay to say this.
Sister Jasmine wanted to say
Go
something.
ahead, Sister Jasmine.
Well, just to go off of what Sister Gabrielle was saying, from an educational part, through the psychology of it, the idea is to constantly feed the youth the negative of Black men, the negative of us. So the reason why that really wasn't, unless we push it, then it will always be something kind of watered down, because they don't want to see 2 million Black men coming together under one umbrella for unity. And so it's so much easier to keep the negatives of murder going around, rather than showing a peaceful event among
Mhm.
Black men. So yes, ma'am.
That's it. One statement that I want to make in our lessons, it just says that
Mm-hmm.
past history,
See, I was gonna say that, but I'm like you said, we were going too far into
going
it.
too
That's why I didn't
far,
want to. Yeah, yeah.
where it says past history shows that Almighty Allah sends prophets and apostles for the people's guide.
We
So
were just talking about that today.
we're talking about that history is a guide. And then it says that with their examples, that you can see the mysteries, and that once you can unlock the mysteries of history, then you can see the
The
light.
mysteries of history.
Then you can see the light. And we know the light is also another term that we use for the truth, right? So yes, history. History is best qualified and most attractive to reward its research. As the messenger says, that it really speaks into the springs and the motives of human interaction. So studying history will let us know why people do stuff. And that's how we're taught. That's a method of how we teach our children, how we're taught, is to understand the whys. All of our
Not
questions
only
are
the whys,
why.
I'm gonna say, but it's not only the whys when you study history. It's the who, what, the when, the where, and the why.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the whole thing about the why did somebody do something? It gets you into their what? Their thinking.
They're thinking, yeah.
And we have to understand the thinking of a people in order to be able to deal with them. That's why the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said we cannot fathom the depths of the mind of Satan.
Right. But in the positive side, that's the same thing with this new educational paradigm. We're not going to get into that new educational paradigm until we ask ourselves why did Master Fard Muhammad do what he did, and then that way we can get into his thinking. Not saying that any of us on here is qualified to answer those questions, but we can qualify ourselves by continuing to ask.
Oh, I can tell you I can tell you why, because he told us why. Because we are the material that Allah wants to use to build the new world with. That's why he came and taught us this. And he told us why. And he told us why we are the material, because of our suffering, because of what we went through. And the minister said it like this. He said that whenever you got in trouble as a child, and you maybe got a spanking or something like that, or you got something happened, you fell and bumped your head when your mom said, don't run. And then the question will be asked, have you learned your lesson? And he said, a lesson is something that becomes a part of you after you experience it. So you never forget. So he came to use us because we are the material of his choice. And he said that the hereafter, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says this, the hereafter comes in on this wise, that the righteous will eat one meal a day. So what he does is that he is literally, I mean, it's a multi pronged approach to bringing in this new world: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. Because when we talk about fear, we're talking about what? Emotion. When we're talking about getting a new knowledge, we're talking about mental. We're talking about eating a new diet, we're talking about physical. We're talking about understanding the knowledge of God, we're talking about spiritual. So he's taking us literally and making us into a brand new people, right in the midst of the enemy. And so we have this, and that's what we have to build on. It's a baton that is being passed. I'm passing the baton to each one of you so that you can take it and run the next leg of the race. And so your genetics will be better probably than my genetics, because as we go down generation after generation, we're erasing something. And so as, go ahead.
That's history being written right in front of our eyes. You're talking about our suffering. That is our history.
That's right.
And so there's a history that's attached to us, which goes into why you can see why the minister's being attacked, is because he's using history as a weapon against them. And not a false history, but as Sister Demoiselle was saying, a true history. So he is like, he let down when Moses was doing battle with the enchanters of Pharaoh. And so, you know, he cast down his staff and it turned into a snake. And, you know, they had their magic, which also made snakes, but his snake swallowed theirs up. But interestingly enough, in Eastern culture, a snake is also a symbol of time. And specifically the snake that eats itself. It talks about in how the snake, how it constantly sheds its skin and renews itself. So so when you're talking about casting down a staff that turns into a snake, it's almost like you put down your history, I put down mine, and literally our history mathematically, you know, lengthwise swallows their history.
That's right.
So this what we've been given again, when we're talking about methodology, when we look at our, as you were saying, it's called the Supreme Wisdom lessons, and our Supreme Wisdom lessons are a telling of a history. You know, why did Musa civilize the devil 2000 BC? And it's given us times. It's given us, as Sister Demoiselle, the who's, the whens, the wheres, the hows of that history, and that's how this battle is being waged. And so now we're back to a certain point in history, because it's cyclical. And now if we do the math, we can see where we are and we can see where we're going. So even at this point in history in our nation, where we are with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan doing the work that he's doing, we also can find that in history, as our lessons tell us. Why does who writes Bible, you know, or Quran, you know, who writes, so it's giving you a little signal there. And then why does Islam renew her history every 25,000 years? So again, these are lessons that we need to learn.
Absolutely. Sister Jasmine, I can see you up there. You had anything to add?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay, well, we're talking about, dealing with the methodology. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and going back to how he was taught, beautiful. He was taught direct instruction for 3 years and 4 months. Malcolm Gladwell, I don't know if you all have heard of him, but he wrote a book about people who have become masters. And he said, in order to master any subject, that it takes approximately 10,000
10,000. Okay, I heard
hours.
you. Yeah.
And so Malcolm Gladwell said, if you practice anything for 10,000 hours, that you will become a master. If you take 3 years and 4 months, approximately, that's about 10,000 hours. So for Mr. Yakub, or the little boy Yakub at the time, who at 6 years old knows what he's born to do, just think, by the time that the child gets enough brain power built up to be able to start using a certain amount of reasoning, because children, when they're very little, they don't really use reasoning. They don't understand cause and effect. So around 3 years old, 2.5, children begin to start making the connection between the outside world and themselves, cause and effect. And that's the principle by which we have to teach our children, from the standpoint of cause and effect. There is no mystery. We've waited on that mystery God, and we've been hungry, naked, outdoors, cause and effect. So once they get, that means that they're able to reason. Once they get to the level of reasoning, 2.5, 3 years old, then what you have to do is that you have to begin to start teaching them in such a way. Just imagine, 2.5 years old, you really start honing in on teaching them. Like Master Farrakhan Muhammad taught the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. By the time they're 6 years old, if you can have a system of learning that is in place, and the learning is unique for every person. Just imagine having a IEP, an individualized learning plan just for you, that compensated for your weaknesses and that it enhanced your strengths. Just imagine. And every mother or father should know this about their child, right? So
Not or father, and father.
And father, you're right. So therefore, you can develop an individualized learning plan for that particular human being, because all of us are as unique as snowflakes are. So not one of us is the same. That's where we get into with the jealousy and envy. And that's when you can get the child to focus in on what he or she is born to do. In many respects, you can eliminate that characteristic that has caused so much destruction. As the minister said, that the family of Adam is the first dysfunctional family, because somebody thought that that their brother had something that they didn't
want.
Yes. So with that being said, now you take that child as a parent, and if you could get them to the point that by the age of 6, they are well on their way, then you can turn their learning over to others. Because let's even go back to Master Farrakhan Muhammad. Master Farrakhan Muhammad, his father paid for him to be educated by different people. So it doesn't mean that you just have to stay at home for your whole academic career, but we should not send our children to school without having a certain requisite knowledge, if that be the case. But we have to put our children in our institutions, and we have to make sure that our teachers are prepared, right? Because you don't want to send your children off to somebody who is not prepared or up to the task after you've spent so much time cultivating that young mind, and then you send them to a system that contaminates what you've already done.
Yeah, it don't take long.
It doesn't take long. It could be one bad experience that could change.
Mhm.
Sister Jasmine?
And also, too, not even just the bad experience, it can be that one person that sees that child developing and they can say that one thing that can change their whole thought process. So it's really important to foster our children's thoughts and literally to know who the enemy truly is and to say, I love my child, so let me just protect them at this time, because the enemy is going to do what the enemy does. Like, we can't be surprised.
Right.
It's gonna happen. It is going to happen, and it's so real. And it's really where we really have to take charge of this post at that time.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Because until we have something in place,
Right.
we really don't have. That's the reason why me personally even got into education. The education was not something that I had intended on going in. I was in physics. Education was just something that, kind of just I fell into,
Right.
just totally accidental, totally. So, and it was born out of trying to protect my children. That was the main reason. And so, yes, we have to do what we have to do, and at all costs. Doesn't matter what you have to do. What you have to. Some people, I heard this one sister say, "Well, don't say sacrifice," but that's what it was. It was a sacrifice and an investment, but it most definitely was a sacrifice at all costs. So let's get on back to this whole educational paradigm. This teaching methodology. Let's look into some more ways. Now, I'm not going to keep on talking. I need you all to come forward and see some of the things. Now we can move up to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. What type of education did he get in these teachings? What kind of student was he when he first got these teachings? What kind of student is he now?
Okay, I would just like to say that, you know, whenever the expert steps on the scene, I was always taught to do step back. Okay, so if I'm a nurse, I might be qualified at the time, but when the doctor comes in the room, I'm going to fall back. So for anybody who did emergency preparedness or disaster training, that's what we are talking. So if you have a lot to say, I'm going to let you handle that, because well, at least I know you have more experience than I do in this situation, and you spend more time on task than I have. And it seems like you're trying to go somewhere. So at this point, I'm just trying to follow.
Well, how about this? We talked about the types of instruction. Let's decompose what type of instruction did he receive. Yes, ma'am.
I want to say, as opposed to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, where you said he had what did you say? Direct. I say the minister had more of distance learning.
Okay,
His
tell
learning
us
was
about
more distant, because I don't know all the ins and outs, but even as I think recently he said something about how he used to write. Sometimes he would write letters to the messenger, or the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or he would I'm assuming get word through somebody or a phone call. Or he would say something maybe in a lecture.
Okay.
So
what kind of student can excel with that type of learning? What level of student would that type of learning be best for?
That would be best for the older students.
Yes.
That would be best for the older students. And I guess to just kind of state the obvious, when you're looking at the condition or the educational background of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad at the time that he was being taught by Master Farrakhan Muhammad, he only finished the third grade of education. So he had that level of educational background. So Master Farrakhan Muhammad, in being a master teacher, considered him as a student, as an individual, and tailored his instruction to what he needed. And so I'm not going to say that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was illiterate just because he didn't didn't finish the fourth grade, but as he said, he has the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So he being the son and grandson of preachers,
Right.
his reading background and his reading foundation came from the Bible.
Right.
So he was in I don't know the last time you looked at a Bible. It's a very large book with a lot of words, and he was well versed in that. So that not because that is a feat. That is a feat. But with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he he went to college.
Went to college. Yeah.
And actually a teacher's college.
Right.
But he didn't finish because of his family situation. He dropped out so he could take care of his family at the time. But he was on track to be a teacher. And then even in his grade school education, as I was listening to a lecture recently where he was saying he was studied in French, not French, Latin.
Latin.
And I think he also took like German or something like that. So, and this is before college, like this was in high school. And he also had, in other times he told us he had taken geometry and, all these high mathematics.
Geometry, calculus, trigonometry.
I mean, a violinist, even music.
Yeah, I think he got the violin like at 6. He was pretty young when his mother put it in 5 or 6.
So his educational foundation could handle that distance learning, that indirect instruction. He had the base for that, and so I think that's something that a lot of people gloss over or don't really acknowledge, because if say for instance with Malcolm, I think he dropped out of high school.
He had an 8th grade.
8th grade.
Oh, 8th grade.
So middle school, high school.
Yeah, between middle school and high school. And so when he came into contact with the teachings, he was able to, take it to a certain level. So that educational background did play a part in being able to even understand the teachings and wrangle with them. And I think that's a lot of times overlooked.
So as an older student, he was able to take a more guided instructional track as opposed to direct instruction. And so he did have some, it was distant learning, but it was a guided instruction, because he said that the messenger would, when he would go to Chicago, have him for dinner and give him lessons.
Right, at the table.
But he said that most of the lessons went over his head. So he had to wait for the time to come to be able to reflect on those lessons that he had before they really they were germinating before they could actually have a shoot up.
But before he was able to climb up that ladder of verbs that you will find in Bloom taxonomy, before he understood the words that were said to him, he memorized them. So he himself, he even went through those different stages of verbs. The student will recite, the student will write, the student will memorize, then he went to the student will understand, the student will explain, and then you get to the level of the student will discern, so
synthesize, and then now it's create is the last level.
Right. And so he himself went through that same, I guess what all students will matriculate through levels of
hierarchy of learning.
Yeah.
Sister Jasmine? It just looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, I mean, I'm just really, it's like a lot of learning because of I came into the nation like 2015. So it's a lot that I'm understanding and learning as I go as well. So yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Praise be to Allah. Well, with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he talked about how his teacher had developed the skill to be able to teach people remotely. And just as an educator, Sister Jasmine, you've taught remote. You've taught all the way in the far country, China.
Yes, ma'am.
Remote learning and to making sure that a student actually gets the lesson. What are some of the challenges that you may have faced with being able to make sure that the student learned what it is that you were teaching? Because the reason I'm bringing this up, because this is important as we look at things today. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Well, to be honest with you, it's really important to accept change. And education is something that is a continual evolving thing. And of course, virtual learning is now. It
Mhm.
may never go back to where it was. And to be honest with you, when I was teaching the Chinese students, a lot of times we can say, my child can't do virtual learning. I've been hearing a lot of that in America, but I had a 3-year-old Chinese student learning English on a computer. So the only reason why we can't do a thing is because someone tells the child that they can't do it, because the
Mhm.
child is ready to learn, the child is
Right.
able to learn, and the only thing that they need is someone that will charge the computer for them to make sure that they're ready for learning. So I definitely think the only thing that can happen at this point is to accept change and to be change agents if we are teachers, and just change and just continually evolve. That's my biggest take from that.
Okay, praise be to Allah. Well, and we talked about the minister's education. Now that was phase one, guided instruction, learning at a distance or distant learning, which I'm not going to call remote learning, a little bit different. Now, he tells us that once the nation fell and he stood back up, we believe in the Nation of Islam that the Honorable, Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is still physically alive. Even though he's not present, we believe that he's physically alive. And the minister is constantly telling us that he's being taught, he's being fed, that he's being, even if you will, guided. Now we're talking about, at this point, remote learning. So you have to look at what kind of student, and I'm saying this to say that the educational process it wasn't finished with the minister. We all are students. I
Mhm.
don't know about you all, but I haven't necessarily been in a classroom with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan per se. I've been in a couple of meetings. I have not had direct instruction from him. I have not had guided instructions other than what everybody else got. But
That's
now,
true.
yes. So we have to be students and we have everything that we need. And as you said, you have to be open. You have to be willing for change. A lot of us are looking for, a voice to come down or
Mhm.
looking for something other than what we have right in front of us. We don't need anything new because we have not mastered what we have. And
Right.
so we come back to the supreme wisdom lessons. This is our educational construct. Yes, Sister Gabrielle.
Okay, you lost me. I'm gonna be honest because I was flipping through
I saw you.
my
I
trying to
was
catch
talking
something.
about the whole concept of remote learning in phase
Yes.
two. In
Okay,
the
so what is your definition of remote learning?
remote learning means, in this definition,
Yeah, okay.
I'm talking about where basically you're getting you don't even like Sister Jasmine. Her student really didn't know her. She's just somebody that is like an arbitrary person who's teaching her from a distance. They don't
Right.
have a personal relationship. And so what I'm talking about in this case, I'm talking about not having a personal relationship, but still yet learning from the teacher. And theoretically, if we look at I guess I have to show you, but these are a copy of the lessons. This is in some respects even remote learning from, it could be direct learning, could be guided learning, depending on how you look at it, from Master Farrakhan Muhammad.
Yeah.
But I don't have a personal relationship with
it. And that's what I was getting at, because I was, as a student, I'm in law school currently, and I'm a 100% virtual law student, which is the first time in law school history. It's because of this virus. And even before, they already had the technology to do virtual learning, but as law school, even before, when you can take some online classes, it was like a part of the board of law school education, where for first year students, no more than 1/3 of their learning could be done virtually. And so because of this virus, it has forced them to do learning, or offer the option to do learning completely virtual. And personally, I thought that I had signed up to go on campus, but when I found out the day before class that I was going to be in a virtual class, and so I had this trepidation about, I know how I learn. I knew I was gonna have issues, but come to find out, as Sister Jasmine was saying, it's really no different. It's really no different.
I think there's a difference between virtual, distant, and remote. Those are three different types of learning on the computer.
Right. And so, but with because I'm in the class, and I see you all's faces, and whoever's talking at the time, I can give that person my undivided attention. And really, just like in a classroom full of people, it's all about my focus and in my attention span, and things that I personally can do as a student. And you might miss certain tactile experiences, the smell of the classroom, the sound of all the doors closing and things like that, that might give you more of an emotional connection. But I actually found that because of this remote situation or this virtual situation, I'm actually more social than I would normally be under circumstances, because that access is not there. So it kind of make me have to work harder and challenge myself. So I immediately off the bat, was reaching out to other students and forming relationships with other students. And I think if I was in person, I wouldn't have been as motivated to do that. And so it's just interesting. And I think it really depends on the student in some instances, and it also depends on the teacher as well.
I think
how well they are able to connect with the students. And so, a wise teacher would know that, being that you're not in person, you might have to work a little bit harder to establish those connections. But I think it still can be done, because really, what helps you learn are your ability to take in information. And so my eyes work, my ears work, so I can learn.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about those words, because virtual, from my understanding, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but a virtual experience is an experience that simulates the real. Remote is control from a distance, right? When we say remote control, that means control from a distance, remote.
Yeah.
And then when you say distance learning, that implies that there is a physical or a digital distance between the two. So, I would like to look into those different types of, those different definitions. But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talked about the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad being able to teach him from a distance at a point in his development. And so these are different types of teaching methodologies, but as you said, Sister Gabrielle, depends on the student. What level is and the teacher? What level is the student at? We're taught in the true history of Jesus that there was a old wise man that found Jesus, because he knew that he was the expected one. And so what he wanted to do was teach him, well, first of all, he wanted to get up on him, and he wanted to teach him a lesson of how to avoid getting captured by the Jews before the time. And so according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he, and I'm just going to skip through it, but he eventually gets to have a conversation with the Jesus of 2,000 years ago, according to the teachings. And he says that he wants to teach him about what's called the radio in the head. Yes. And so what he did essentially is that he taught him, I think, in 2 lessons, how to use the radio in the head, which we call remote. This will be remote learning. So how could he teach him from where he was? And he sent him a message, and the message, the old man sent Jesus the message and gave him the greetings of Assalamu alaikum. And that is how he learned, you know, and he used mathematics to get to him according to the teachings. 3 lessons? Okay, 3
That's what
lessons.
I thought.
Yeah,
That's
I knew
what
it
I
was
thought.
3, but I just want to make sure that
Okay, well, good. 3 lessons. We want to make sure that's clear. But he used mathematics. He wanted to learn about algebra. And so he was, you know, there's a connection, and these narratives, there's so much in them. So when we start talking about teaching using this transitional curriculum called the Supreme Wisdom Lessons, moving to the new, each one of these questions and answers or instructions are packed with histories, as Sister Gabrielle said. It's about histories. And then when you get to the problem book, you're talking about high science, science of the highest magnitude. And so all of this is in here. And so we as educators have to, like the minister said, doesn't, ma'am, what did you say?
You have to become well versed.
We have to become well versed in the Muhammad that brought us the lessons that we want to know, Master Fard Muhammad, and we want to get into his mind. We have to get into the lessons because that's where his mind is contained for us. And then the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I'm going to say this as we start winding down because I want to recap everything as we wind down. But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that of the 3 years and 4 months that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught him, that Master Fard Muhammad taught him, that 75% of what he taught him was of the hereafter. There's not much that we hear about of hereafter in our teachings per se. We don't really get into that. So he knew about the future, but he was taking a step by step in development because you don't want to go too fast. You don't want to have too steep of a gradient because you're talking about a people that's coming from slavery, moving them to the position of God. So you have to take them step by step. So 75% of what he taught was about the hereafter, after the enemy his power has been broken to rule us. And in the How to Eat to Live, I believe it's book 1, he said, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, 1972, he said, the hereafter is now for me and my followers. So there's something that, as he said, the hereafter will begin on this wise, as he says in this book, that the righteous will eat 1 meal a day. There are, like I said, a multi-pronged method of education that is not just, taking in information. See, it's so masterfully crafted that the enemy could not just come in and just take our system and then just rename it the Eureka method and give it to his children and make them into gods. Yeah, that's not how it worked. You had to have discipline in all these different areas, which kind of brings me back to what I wanted to say about the minister's foundation, his educational foundation. In the educational philosophy, they call that type of education that he had. Now, I want us to consider this, that he was in Boston, Massachusetts, right? Massachusetts is the first state in the early 1920s. He's born in 1933. In the early 1920s is where Massachusetts is the state that compulsory education first was mandated. And they took their educational model from the Prussians, so which is now modern day Russia. Their educational philosophy was based upon what they call a classical education. When you say classical, that meant that you had to educate the complete person. They had to be academically astute. They had to be physically sound and fit. They had to have artistic ability. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he tells us that he wants his ministers to know about medicine, music, and color. So he's saying that there's a certain mix that makes this perfect vessel in order to deposit this or to be this perfect student. Like we have an ideal student. You know, at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, there's an ideal student that we're looking for that will make, we believe, the best candidate to be the type of educator that we need to move this thing along faster. But it doesn't mean that other people can't qualify. But it just means that if we could get the ideal student, it'll make the process a lot easier. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was looking for an ideal student. Master Farad Muhammad was looking for an ideal student. So it is our job to prepare these ideal students to become the gods that will rule in this new world. Sister Gabrielle? And then Sister Dana?
No, I was just going to mention that Prussia is modern day Germany, not Russia.
Modern day Germany. Thank you for that correction. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, and I was going to say, before you go into anything else, we had a question from a Sister Star Muhammad.
Okay, praise be to one of our star students in our class in the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, the orientation class. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, she asked, am I considered a remote learner? If so, what's the steps to close the gap between the teacher and the student based upon the examples given?
Very good question. Well, the thing that you could do to close the gap between the student and the teacher, I wish I had it with me, but it's a book called Closing the Gap. And it says no, but I'm serious. The subtitle tells it all. It says the inner views, INNER, views of the heart and the mind of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. If you want to close the gap between yourself and the teacher, what you have to do is that you have to get into the teacher's mind. And so as a student, when you get into the teacher's mind, there is no gap.
Right.
That's it. So a good teacher, okay, I'm gonna let you all say, a good teacher, as Sister Gabrielle said, will tell you what they expect on day one. And if you just stay the course of what the teacher has given you, you will be the student's top student. I mean, the teacher's top student. And that is for each student in your class. It doesn't have to be a top student, you know, because you had the highest grade, but it's because you submitted yourself more to the process. Yes, Sister, let's let Sister Jasmine go and Sister Gabrielle.
Yeah. Well, basically, I actually did my undergrad and my grad school online. At that time, it was considered online. Of course, remote is kind of, I would figure more Zoom calls, whereas the teacher is still giving instruction. But literally for me, it was me giving books, and then they
Yeah.
gave me due dates. So it's literally you have to take charge of that part that you want to do. And that's how you close the gap is you take out that middle person and you
Mm.
go ahead and you study and you study. And until you reach that perfected of that ideal of what it is that is required, then you can move forward. And that is how you close the gap.
Yes, ma'am. Praise be to Allah. So
Um,
both of you all have experience with getting higher or post-secondary degrees online. That is, like you said, the now.
Right.
We won't go back.
Right. And just to be I've actually seen I've seen the differences or what is actually taking place within the virtual schools. And it's of course, there's so many things that's not happening because they're not willing to accept that change. So if
Mm.
you say, hey, this is what it is. Let me get what I need to get in order to make sure that I close the gap. You have to take charge of your education because it's easy to have someone hold your hand, but it's even more rewarding when you studied and you focused on whatever that principle is to make that your purpose.
Hmm. Yes, ma'am. I hope that helps Sister Star. Sister Gabrielle?
yeah, and also I think, kind of with this, what is virtual and what is remote, I think what is more, we're talking about synchronous and asynchronous learning when we're talking about these online environments. And so a synchronous environment is, like Sister Jasmine was saying, this example of logging into remote classes where it's just a virtual setup where you're still interacting live with somebody and having that classroom um, environment. But the asynchronous part is where you might have, do this, do this assignment by this date, and things like that, and they put it in your hand to really guide the pacing of your learning. And so, but what I will say is, if you want to close the gap between you and your teacher, whether it be virtual or remote, or in person, or what have you, I would say the key is communication. And so, when you're not able to have that in person and live communication, I would say have mock communications with yourself. That's one thing I always say is that whatever you just learned, try to talk about it. Have a deliberative dialogue and answer the question, pose a question, and then answer it yourself as if you were the teacher. And then you will be surprised at the answers you come up with. And that's kind of how you get in the mind. And so, for example, as Sister Jasmine saying, you have a book. So, ask the question as the Most High Muhammad, who is God. Then give your answer. Don't give his answer yet. Try giving your answer. Like, I think it's this and this. And then go to the part where he gives the answer. And then you have to ask yourself as a student, asking your teacher, why would you ask that? And then now this is the part where you have to use your creativity and try to piece together the thinking of the teacher in those moments when you're not able to have those conversations. And also having conversations with other people. So just this is deliberative dialogue. I would say is a way you can close the gap.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, and then, yes, ma'am, Sister Jasmine.
Well, Sister Gabrielle, just to go off of what you just said, something too, that just kind of rung a bell. So it's also something called peer tutoring. And so that's one way that you can really understand or to double check yourself is to try to teach that concept to someone else, especially virtually. There's somebody around the house that you can just say, hey, what do you think about this? And that's your way of understanding exactly what you really understand.
Yes, absolutely. And so, Sister Star, um, and just with any student, as having been a teacher now for almost 20 years, teachers love when students are engaged. So they love to know that a student is, on task, is reaching even beyond the lesson. So don't hesitate to reach out to your instructor, because that's the one thing that as teachers, we all want to know whether or not the student is engaged in what you learn. But as Sister Gabrielle said, and we learned in our MGT class, write down your questions. Ask yourself the question to see if you can come up with the answer first. And then after that, you go to your teacher. And that's how we transition from learning at the lower levels where you have direct instruction to learning with guided instruction. And then you can have, I'll say, remote learning. Okay. So, or even the highest level may be online learning, when you just really are given the books and it is up to you to be able to extract from what is in front of you the lesson that you need to learn. So with that being said, we are almost at the end of our podcast. We want to thank Sister Jasmine for coming on and blessing us. We would love to have you come back when you're ready to launch the school, have you come back with us, or even just have you come join us as we continue to delve into the whole concept of a curriculum.
Yes, ma'am.
Built on this igneomatic, if you will, wisdom called the supreme wisdom that was given to us by Master Farrakhan Muhammad in this very, what we call coded language, cryptic language that, is meant for us to go into, to parse, to break it down, because it will absolutely set off explosions in our mind that will open worlds of thought to us. Just think about it. A universe is 76 quintillion miles in diameter. I mean, that is just amazing. And this was said in 1930. So just what is in this universe? What is a quintillion? And so with that being said, this is what we as educators have been tasked to do, to go deeper, to go further. We have a universe that's out there that's just waiting for us to explore, and we are to bring it to our babies and ourselves, so that we can be a nation of gods, of righteousness here and now. So I want to thank Sister Demoiselle, our engineer and producer, for her insightful commentary. We want to thank Sister Gabrielle for coming on and always blessing us with the practical application and understanding of, so when sometimes I get a little, she can bring it down to earth and help decode what I'm saying. So until next time, we would like to, of course, ask you to like this episode, because it helps to share it with other people, and the YouTube algorithms will begin to start sharing it with other people. We want you to subscribe. We have reached over the 300 mark of subscribers. Our goal is 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year. And hit your notification bells, because we're going to continue bringing you insightful commentary and videos that deal with this new educational paradigm and this new world education, brought to you by the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center. And look forward to, in the very near future, we're going to do a masterclass on how to open your own school called Education in a Box, as well as we should have another class coming up soon for the Supreme Wisdom Orientation course. So may Allah bless you all until we see you again. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.